An introduction to sampling techniques. When conducting a study on a particular topic, the population is the entire group being studied. Using the whole population is accurate, however, is very difficult in practice. If you use the whole population in your study, you are conducting a census of the population. Sampling is often more practical. Sampling uses only a small fraction of the population in the study. A good sample is reflective of the whole population and is random so that each member of the population has a fair chance of being selected in the study. We will examine some different ways to choose a sample as applied to an example. Westmount recently wanted to include student voice in gathering some feedback about flex days. Would it be practical to collect data from every Westmount student? When you have more than 1,000 people, a census may not be practical. How could the Flex Day Committee select a sample from the population, which includes all Westmount students? With simple random sampling, the sample is selected so that each member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. For our example, each student in the roster is assigned a number. A computer program randomly generates a list of 200 numbers and duplicates are deleted. Students are selected that correspond to these numbers. Simple random sampling is easy to implement and there's a fair chance to all members. However, selected members may not represent the entire population. For example, many students that are selected may be part of an extracurricular club or clubs that always meet on flex days and may have a skewed perspective. With stratified random sampling, first the population is divided into groups and a random sample is taken from each group. The number from each group is proportional to the size of the group. A percentage of each group is selected. In our example, the school is divided into 4 groups by grade. 10% of each grade is selected and those students are surveyed. More grade 9s are selected than grade 12s since grade 9s form a larger group of students. With stratified random sampling, there's a fair representation of the population. However, it's hard to set up. The committee in our example would have to do a lot of work to set up this type of sampling. With cluster sampling, the population is divided into groups and all members of selected subgroups are surveyed. A particular grade, for example, grade 9, would be selected in our example, and all students in that grade would be surveyed. This is a very easy technique. However, some opinions are overrepresented and others are underrepresented. For example, junior students may have a different opinion of flex days than senior students. With systematic sampling, a survey of every nth person or object is completed. From the roster of student names, every 50th student is selected to complete the survey in our example. This is a fair selection process. However, one particular group may be overrepresented. With convenience sampling, a sample is selected from the population based on availability or convenience. In our example, all students in the Learning Commons on Flex Day at 8:30 are included in the study. This is easy and convenient. However, the sample does not necessarily represent the population. In our example, only early risers who are early to period 1 are represented. With voluntary sampling, people volunteer for the study. In our example, all students and advisor asked if they would like to do a survey and provided with a QR code to link them to a Google form. This is easy, and you'll often see it used in pharmaceutical or medical trials. However, respondents may not be reflective of the population. It sometimes allows for multiple survey responses from one individual, which could also skew results. In our example, only students who have access to an electronic device during advisor would be able to fill out the form, or those that remember to complete the survey later. In conclusion, this slide went over the various sampling techniques associated with conducting a survey. Here is a summary list of the types of sampling techniques you're responsible for. Simple random sample, stratified random sample, cluster sample, systematic sample, convenient sample, and voluntary sample.